Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Jaya Prabhupada 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada 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 Nitai Gaur Haribo 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 Nitai Gaura Haribo, 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 Haribo. Jaya Radhe, Jaya Radhe, Jaya Radhe, Jaya Radhe. Jaya Radhe, Jaya Radhe, Jaya Radhe, Jaya Shri Radhe. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Grantharaja Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Gaura Premanande, all glories. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 This morning, as a continuation of our Scientific Saturdays, we're going to study from the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 7. It's chapter 15, and we're looking at verse 41. Ahu Shariram Ratam Indriyani Ahu Shariram Ratam Indriyani Hayam Abhishin Abhish, oh sorry, I need better glasses. Mana Indriyesham Hayan Abhishun Mana Indriyesham Vartmani Matra Dishanam Cha Sutam Vartmani Matra Dishanam Cha Sutam Sattvam Brihad Bandhuram Isha Shristam Sattvam Brihad Bandhuram Isha Shristam Ahu Shariram Ratam Indriyani Hayana Bishun Mana Indriyesham Vartmani Matra Dishanam Chasutam Sattvam brihadbandunam isha shrishtam
Sattvam brihadbanduram isha shrishtam
Ahu shariram ratam indriyani
Ahu shriram ratam indriyani
Hayana bishudmana indriyesham
Hayana vishurmana indriyesham
Vartmani matra tishanam chasutam
Vaidmani matra dishanam chasutam
Sattvam brihadbanduram isha shristam
Sattvam brihadbanduram isha shrishtam Ahu shariram ratam indriyani
Ahu shariram ratam indriyani
Ayana vishurmana indriyesham
Hayana bishudmana indriyesham
Vartmani matra dishanam chasutam
Vartmani matra tishanam chasutam
Sattvam brihadbanduram isha shrishtam
Sattvam brihadbanduram isha shristam. Shariram ratam indriyani Hayana bishudmana indriyesham Vartmani matra tishanam chasutam Sattvam brihadbanduram isha shrishtam Ahu. It is said, Shariram, the body, Ratam, the chariot, Indriyani, the senses, Hayan, the horses, Abhishun, the reins, Manaha, the mind, Indriya, of the senses, Isham, the master, Vatmani, the destinations, Matra, the sense objects, Dishanam, the intelligence, Cha, and Sutam, the chariot driver, Sattvam, consciousness, Brihat, great, Bandunam, bondage, Isha, by the Supreme Personality of Godhead,
by the Supreme Personality of Godhead,
Shristam,
Shrishtam,
created. Translation. Transcendentalists who are advanced in knowledge compare the body, which is made by the order of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, to a chariot. The senses are like the horses. The mind, the master of the senses, is like the reins. The object of the senses are the destinations. Intelligence is the chariot driver, and consciousness, which spreads throughout the body, is the cause of bondage in this material world. Please repeat. Transcendentalists who are advanced in knowledge compare the body, which is made by the order of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, to a chariot. The senses are like the horses. The mind, the master of the senses, is like the reins. The objects of the senses are the destinations. Intelligence is the chariot driver. And consciousness, which spreads throughout the body, is the cause of bondage in this material world. Purport by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. For a bewildered person in the materialistic way of life, the body, the mind, and the senses, which are engaged in sense gratification, are the cause of bondage to repeated birth, death, old age, and disease. But for one who is advanced in spiritual knowledge, the same body, senses, and mind are the cause of liberation. This is confirmed in the Katha Upanishad 1:3 verses 3 and 4 plus 9 as follows. Atmanam ratinam vidi shariram ratameva cha buddhim cha saratim vidi mana pragraham eva cha indriyani hayanahur vishayangs teshvagocharan sadvana paramapnoti tad vishnu paramam padam. The soul is the occupant of the chariot of the body, of which the driver is the intelligence. The mind is the determination to reach the destination. The senses are the horses, and the sense objects are also included in that activity. Thus one can reach the destination, Vishnu, who is Param Padam, the supreme goal of life. In conditioned life, the consciousness in the body is the cause of bondage, but the same consciousness, when transformed into Krishna consciousness, becomes the cause for one's returning home back to Godhead. The human body, therefore, may be used in two ways: for going to the darkest regions of ignorance, or for going forward back home, back to Godhead. To go back to Godhead, the path is Mahat Seva, to accept the self-realized spiritual master. Mahat Sevam Dvaram Ahu Vimukte. For liberation, one should accept the direction of authorized devotees who can actually endow one with perfect knowledge. On the other hand, Tamodvaram Yoshitam Sangi Sangam. If one wants to go to the darkest regions of material existence, one may continue to associate with persons who are attached to women. Yoshitam Sangi Sangam. The word Yoshit means woman. Persons who are too materialistic are attached to women. It is said, therefore, Atmanam ratinam vidi shariram ratam evacha. The body is just like a chariot or car in which one may go anywhere. One may drive well, or else one may drive whimsically, in which case it is quite possible that he may have an accident and fall into a ditch. In other words, if one takes directions from the experienced spiritual master, one can go back home, back to Godhead. One may return to the cycle, otherwise one may return to the cycle of birth and death. Therefore, Krishna personally advised, Ashadadhana Purusha, Dharmasyasya Parantapa, Aprapya Mam Nivartante, Mritya Sangsara Vartmani. Those who are not faithful on the path of devotional service cannot attain me. O conqueror foes, but return to birth and death in this material world. Bhagavad Gita 9.3. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, personally gives instructions on how one can return home back to Godhead. But if one does not care to listen to his instructions, the result will be that one will never go back to Godhead, but will continue life in this miserable condition of repeated birth and death in material existence. Mrityu Sangsara Vartmani. The advice of experienced transcendentalists, therefore, is that the body be fully engaged for achieving the ultimate goal of life, Svartha Gatim. The real interest or goal of life is to return home back to Godhead. To enable one to fulfill this purpose, there are so many Vedic literatures, including Vedanta Sutra, the Upanishads, Bhagavad Gita, Mahabharata, and the Ramayana. One should take lessons from these Vedic literatures and learn how to practice Nivritti Marg. Then one's life will be perfect. The body is important as long as it has consciousness. Without consciousness, the body is merely a lump of matter. Therefore, to return home, back to Godhead, one must change his consciousness from material consciousness to Krishna consciousness. One's consciousness is the cause of material bondage, but if this consciousness is purified by bhakti yoga, one can then understand the falsity of his upadhi, his designations as Indian, American, Hindu, Muslim, Christian, and so on. Sarvapadi vinirmuktam tat paradvena nirmalam. One must forget these designations and use this consciousness only for the service of Krishna. Therefore, if one takes advantage of the Krishna consciousness movement, his life is certainly successful. Ahu shariram nartam indriyani hayana bishun mana indriyesham vartmani matra dishanam chasutam satvam brihad bandhuram isha shristam. Transcendentalists who are advanced in knowledge compare the body, which is made by the order of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, to a chariot. The senses are like the horses. The mind, the master of the senses, is like the reins. The objects of the senses are the destinations. Intelligence is the chariot driver, and consciousness, which spreads throughout the body, is the cause of bondage in this material world. We titled this particular discussion as Analogies of the Atma's Entanglement, because we've been discussing the nature of consciousness, that consciousness is the property, the composition of who we are, the conscious entity, the Atma. And it is distinct in its properties and its functions from that of the physical world, including our physical, biological, neurological body, and also distinct from the properties even of the mind. And we have offered meditations and understanding of that. But we are bewildered by it all, because we are somehow or other, our consciousness is absorbed in this body. And there's various analogies offered within the Bhagavatam to help us. Analogies, as you know, are meant just to give a way of visualizing something, a way of comprehending a particular message. No analogy is perfect and matches up in every respect, but it creates enough kind of similarities that we can get an idea of what's going on. And this idea of the body as a chariot is, of course, very famous within those who have studied Vedanta and everything. Why? Mainly because it's originally found in the Katha Upanishad, as quoted here. And but actually it comes up twice in the Bhagavatam, at least twice that I found. One in the 4th canto, and one here in the 7th canto. And each time it comes up, different things are mentioned. So the analogy is being extended in order to get a few other points across. The Katha Upanishad is actually quite simple in comparison to the Bhagavatam. But everyone thinks the Upanishads are, and it's important that it's in the Upanishads because that's Shruti, and no one argues with the authority of Shruti. So when the Srimad Bhagavatam takes it up, it's even more authoritative. So I've got a little comparison, and actually this is available on the PDF that can be downloaded. A comparison of the different elements that are mentioned, both in the Katha Upanishad and then in Bhagavatam 4th canto and in 7th canto. And there's some that, there's no disagreement as such, but it's just that some contain more than others. So, the chariot, that's the body. Okay, that one's fairly easy. The horses, the senses. Now, little disagreement here, because the Katha Upanishad really generally considers them the Gyanendriyas, the knowledge-acquiring senses. And if you see our picture in the Bhagavad Gita, the old one, it's got the horses with the kind of breastplate thing, and it's got an ear, or it's got the different senses on it. So that each horse, each of the 5 horses, is one of the 5 senses. The reins, the mind. And the driver holding the reins, intelligence. Very good. The passenger. Okay, so now we've got the body, we've got mind, intelligence, and the soul. There's something missing that we would. Ahankara. Why is ahankara not mentioned?
All of that is Ahankara, right?
Well, because the passenger, the soul, would not be in the chariot if it wasn't the soul encased or covered by Ahankara. And that point is made, I think, is it made in this one or is it in one of the others?
This
Actually, I think maybe made in the next verse. The living entity in the bodily concept of life is the owner of the chariot. So that's under Ahankara. And the same is going to be true when we talk about Paranjan. It talks about mind, it talks about intelligence, it doesn't mention Ahankara because Paranjan is also the soul covered by Ahankara. Because if we weren't covered by Ahankara, we wouldn't be in the chariot, we wouldn't be in the city trying to enjoy it. So, those are fairly straightforward. And then there's the Bhagavatam is taking it on further here. What's the roads and the destinations?
The sense objects.
They're the sense objects. They're where the horses are trying to get to. Right? The horses are the senses, and where do senses try to get to? Sense objects. Right? So that's the destinations when we're in material life. And then it gets kind of interesting. There's the wheels. It's mentioned that the wheels are spinning, but there's no progress. The wheels are moving, but there's no real progress. But they turn. And as they turn, the top represents irreligion and the bottom religion. So when they turn, we're going through pious and impious activities. And there's 10 spokes, and that's the next verse in this chapter of the Bhagavatam explains there's 10 spokes belonging to each wheel. And those 10 spokes are the life heirs. So this is explaining how there is connection between the subtle body through the life heirs to the actual machinery of the gross body. The whole connection is facilitated by those 10 life heirs. So the whole movement of the chariot is actually facilitated by the spokes of the wheels, which are the life heirs. And it's said that it is these life heirs that are the responsibility for the bondage, because they're linking us in. But in this particular verse, it is said consciousness, which spreads throughout the body, is the cause of bondage. Now, this is consciousness used in its second term. Remember, we said there was 2 ways that Prabhupada uses consciousness. We are consciousness. We are a thing of consciousness. That is what the Atma is. Right? That is Chit. But at the same time, there is the kind of shining forth of our consciousness, what it actually absorbs itself in. And that energy that emanates from the Atma is Chitta. I'm going to talk about that in the next class, where we analyze the 3rd canto statements on Chitta, Ahankara, Buddhi and Mana. It's the 4th of what's called the Antakarana, the 4 internal organs.
Is there a difference between Chit and Chitta? Like Chit is what we are, and Chitta is the quality.
Chitta is this kind of shining forth of our consciousness, and it gets wrapped up in the Mahat, and therefore whatever we shine our consciousness on, we are becoming attached to. So it is the shining of our consciousness through the body and being aware of everything that is going on, thanks to the actually the workings of the airs and their connection of the body and the senses back into the mind. We're aware of everything, and because of our only interest is awareness of what's going on in our body, basically. That's the cause of bondage. The chitta is chitta. It's referred to here, it's not, in the word for consciousness, it's sattvam. That's interesting. Because sattvam refers to Vishuddha sattva. That is the quality of chitta, Vishuddha sattva. And when Vishuddha sattva emanates from the individual living entities, it is this chitta which kind of gives us the experience of the world. I want to go into that one in more detail next week when the Bhagavatam's explaining it. Today I want to look at more what these particular verses explain on mana and buddhi. The reins, it's mentioned here, are meant to be the master of the senses. The reins are meant to control the horses. But it all depends on who's holding the reins. The reins, are tugged on by the horses, and therefore they naturally would want to lead there. But there is the sutam here, or the chariot driver holding onto them. That's intelligence, buddhi. Now, in the actually it's in that same picture of the chariot. You see intelligence and you see the passenger. The passenger's completely freaked out at the back. But intelligence also looks pretty worried. But actually, intelligence is a manifestation of super soul.
That's the thing that I don't get. Like, why is the mind? I mean, I already asked that question maybe to notice. Why is the mind in goodness and intelligence in passion? And then now you say that it's not.
No, they're produced from ahankara. When ahankara is agitated by sattvam, it produces the mind. And then when ahankara is agitated by rajas, it produces intelligence. And when it's agitated by ignorance, it produces ahankara, because ahankara is the first element of ignorance. And passion, I don't think we're given very clear descriptions of why it's like that. But what you can understand is that it is the intelligence which allows us to. It enables action or control over the mind. But the mind is definitely can be pretty crazy, and intelligence needs to be very good. In Ireland, we have a famous comedy song called "The Jarvey Was a Leprechaun." That's probably two words you don't know there. You've heard of a leprechaun, right? It's these are the little people. They're like fairies, but they're more like gremlins. They're always up to mischief, and treated with great respect in Ireland. So the Jarvey is actually the driver of a little cart, and usually a kind of taxi type of cart. The story is about this Jarvey who is a leprechaun. These poor tourists got on this cart and they thought they were going for a nice little tour of the area, the west coast of Ireland. And no, they were taken on this whirlwind trip because the intelligence was completely, the Jarvey, the driver, was completely out of control. So he was just flying here, there and everywhere. And they went up and down these mountains and never seen again. So there's a warning there about we don't want a Jarvey. But actually what we have got is we have super soul for intelligence. The second canto explains that intelligence is the form direction of the supersoul. This is a great kindness. Krishna, the supersoul, is present in our hearts alongside us. And in that role, he takes the responsibility of the intelligence. He's actually in control of the intelligence. And why? Because if the soul came into this world and just had to cope with the wild mind, it's bad enough as it is, isn't it? You know, the Atma just couldn't cope with the prakritic mind. So actually, Krishna holds the reins as the intelligence. Krishna is our chariot driver. The passenger actually doesn't do anything other than what does a passenger do? Desire. Yeah. Give some generalized kind of idea, you know. Take me somewhere nice, sort of thing. Then the senses, the senses are working. Oh, somewhere nice. I know, something nice to see, something nice to touch, nice to taste, And they're pulling on everything. Because they're pulling, the reins are agitated. The mind is agitated and thinking, well, maybe we should go there. Maybe, we'll take this route. That'll be the best way to get to that. And intelligence has to say, wait a minute. Agree or not? So if Krishna as Paramatma is intelligence, how is it that he lets us get into such nonsense? It allows our mind to actually take control and determine what we're going to do. And that is because that as in that role, Krishna is acting, according to what we desire. And it's because we have set the agenda that I want to be in material life. I want to enjoy the facilities of this body. I want to enjoy sense gratification. Then intelligence has taken that, that's the agenda, that is what it has to be fulfilled. And therefore it deals with the mind accordingly. And because of that, that's the consciousness spreading throughout the body. That is, we have, as Prabhupada said, in conditioned life, the consciousness in the body is the cause of bondage. But the same consciousness, i.e. the same chitta that's emanating from us, when we transform that into Krishna consciousness, then there is the opportunity to control. Then the intelligence says, okay, very good, this is what I'm here for. I shall now help you. And it becomes, the mind automatically becomes controlled by intelligence, and our destination becomes going back home, back to Godhead. I'm going to mention another analogy that's given in the fourth canto, which of course is the city of 9 gates. And it also talks about the situation of the soul. And it says, when the living entity wants to enjoy the modes in their totality, he prefers the body with 9 gates, 2 hands and 2 legs, which is a human or demigod. So that is seen to be the best one for actually getting material enjoyment. And so compared to other animal species or other creatures that we could be inhabiting. And between humans and demigods are definitely better at enjoying than humans. So the city which is likened to the body, exists within the kingdom of Panchala. So that is the environment for material enjoyment. And then there's 9 gates, which are the orifices of the body. 5 gates at the front, which are, eyes, nostrils, and mouth. We have the right ear, the left ear, and we have 2 gates down in the western direction, it says. So, again, as I mentioned, no mention of Ahankar, because Paranjan is the soul entangled. And what really is being the example and analogy of Paranjan covers a number of different aspects and messages. But one of them that is very deeply explored is the relationship with his queen, intelligence. So Paranjan has his own friends. They're the senses, the 5 working senses, the 5 knowledge acquiring senses. The queen as intelligence has her attendants, the mind. And which is the leader of the senses. In this case, Paranjan does something which seems strange. If we've just been explaining how intelligence is controlling the activities of the senses, the Paranjan story discusses a little different. First of all, it explains that the real way that the living entity experiences the world is by the mind going forth through the senses. We tend to think that when I experience something, something has come to me. Light has come to me. A sound has come through the pressure waves of the air. An aroma has wafted in the air to me. But really what is happening is that the mind is going out gathering the tanmatras and bringing them back. Now, there's an interesting part of the Paranjan story where he goes out without intelligence, without his queen. And he goes off hunting and he kills animals unnecessarily. And he's just very cruel and nasty. And he's just obviously been a complete creep. And he returns back. And intelligence is really mad at him. She's upset. So that seems to be a very different relationship with intelligence, as we've been explaining, controlling what we experience in this world. So, but what is explained is that this is a different function of intelligence. This is intelligence as conscience, not consciousness, conscience. You know, that little voice inside, that when we do something stupid or bad or off, you know, it says, shouldn't have done that. You should not have done that. That was stupid. Right? This is the voice we hear. We know it's not us. It speaks to it. It's not like how we hear our mind speaking to us. It's a different voice. It's coming from deeper. It's much more authoritative. It's much more serious. Is it the voice of Super Soul? We call conscience. It is intelligence. It is Buddhi. It is Buddhi actually speaking to us. You know, basically Buddhi saying, normally I'm happy to do, facilitate whatever you want. You know, I look after it all. We can't experience anything if it wasn't for Buddhi. If it wasn't for the chariot driver holding the reins, letting the horses go to this place or that, we would experience nothing. So intelligence is the gatekeeper for all our experiences. It allows some, it facilitates things. But at times, it just gets mad with us. And what seems to facilitate that voice is when Paranjan comes back after his hunting and all his nastiness. He's exhausted, he's tired. Something has... It's just when we tire of material life, when we actually allow ourselves, just wait a minute, it's almost that we have questioned it ourselves. We've dropped our guard, we've dropped our enthusiasm for material life. And in that moment, that's when conscience can speak and say, yeah, no, it wasn't good. It wasn't good. So that's the sort of additional kind of understanding of this role of intelligence that the city of Nine Gates takes. Conscience is an interesting word. It comes from the Latin conscire, which basically scire means to know, con with others. To know with others. And basically it originates from this idea that I should know something is wrong because others think that it's wrong. You see? So if I'm in tune with other people, I know it's bad to do this or that. So that's a very social kind of idea of conscience. But what the Bhagavatam is explaining is that when this voice speaks inside, it's not because of... It's not something you've heard from society. It's something coming much deeper. And if you take it seriously, that this voice is saying, why are you laboring and struggling in material life? You know, you've tried this type of sense gratification and that type. I've taken you everywhere. I've given you, taken to every destination. You've tried it all. Are you not tired? Are you not exhausted? Are you not ready for something that might actually make you happy now? So, intelligence as our friend. And again, the other analogy of the two birds in the tree. Prabhupada explains, one bird is trying to nibble at all the fruits, and the other bird is just, his friend, just watching. That's a different kind of role that Supersoul is playing than we've been describing in these particular analogies. But it deepens our understanding of the relationship between Supersoul and ourselves. So we're trying to enjoy, and it's when we kind of tire of that and turn our face to Supersoul that the Supersoul, the relationship is generated. And then the consciousness that we were trying to, we had set ourselves the goal of trying to enjoy this material world. Now if we start to see, well, actually, I'd like to set my goal as service to Krishna. So the Supersoul as intelligence is delighted. Finally, we've come to our senses, made a good resolution, and can direct us in order how to engage our senses and our mind and our towards the service of Krishna. And I think we've discussed this before, that the key thing is in order to fully, if you like, brief the intelligence that we are serious about a change in our consciousness. What actually has to change is the identity that we have as a passenger. Let's change that first. Prabhupada explains that in purport in the second canto, that when we change our sense of identity, I'm the passenger, yes, I'm in this body. I'm not going to change that for the moment. But what is the identity of this passenger? Is it as the enjoyer? Is it as the servant of Krishna? So when we change our identity, then automatically Krishna, as our friend, the super soul who is presiding over our intelligence, takes that on board. That becomes the agenda. That you, as someone who's now identifying yourself as a devotee, are now going to be facilitated with your mind thinking of wonderful ideas for service to Krishna, with your mind becoming attracted to the service of Krishna, to the deities, to all the paraphernalia, to the activities of chanting, to the sound and the nectar of the holy name. These will come to us because we have changed this identity, and the consciousness that is flowing from us is actually flowing to Krishna, and appreciating all the wonderful kind of features of Krishna's qualities, and the beauty of the relationship that exists between Krishna and his all his devotees. So we've got time for a few little questions, but before that I'm just going to mention one other analogy, and that is Prabhupada mentions about the driver here, where he says the body is just like a chariot or car in which one may go anywhere. You can drive well or else drive whimsically. So that's the warning to us, that in one sense, yes, we've just said intelligence is the chariot driver. Nothing happens in the chariot without intelligence's control. And here Prabhupada said, we can drive anywhere because we set the agenda. And we often give this example of the car. The driver of a car is a modern example of the chariot. And but now we've got autonomous vehicles. Is that a help or a hindrance? No. It's actually a better example, isn't it? It's actually better. Because instead of thinking we are in control on this driving wheel, no. We're a passenger in an autonomous vehicle. And it's guided by artificial intelligence. So that fits. And where is it going? We set the agenda. We give it a destination. That's all we do. Step into those things and, it works out the best way to take you to your destination. It's got a program that works like the mind. Oh, you want to go to somewhere that you can enjoy this or that, see nice things, okay. It comes up with a few ideas, it programs where it's going to go and how it's going to get there. It's got nothing to do with you. Actually, that's very, very close to how we exist within this body. We're not the doers, we're the desirers, and therefore because of our desire we have agency. Because Krishna will fulfill our desire, therefore that allows us agency. But actually we're not the doers. Everything is carried out mechanically by the systems that we've just been discussing. That's the difference. All right. Anything?
Does it mean that the setting of, is it already from previous lives, or can we still change where we're going now in this life, or it's already all predestined and we just...
When we come into this life, the mind is carried with us. And the mind has all the, what's called the sanskars. Every impression of every life is stored in the mind. It's all there. And when you get back into a particular body, if we were going through this different species and we arrived in a dog body, then the sanskars that remind us how to behave as a dog pop up again. Why? Because intelligence says, all right, those are the sanskars we're going to look at. So, mind carries everything from previous life. And particularly, we call some of them vasanas, impressions. These are things which seem to be present from previous lives, which are influencing our nature, our interests, our inclinations in this lifetime. So we're carrying that with us. And we may be influenced and we may be affected to act according to those influences. So you could say there's a certain of pre-programming, but it's not predestination, because we don't have to follow them. Nothing that the mind comes up with do we have to follow. But our ability that we don't end up following what our mind is trying to lead us into depends on our relationship with our intelligence. And praying that our resolution is strong and saying, no, this is not what I want. I want a different life this time. I want a life of Krishna consciousness, not a life of material suffering. So nothing's predestined, but things are carried. So there's lots of prompts that we've got from previous lives. There's the karmic situations that we'll come across, which will, because of previous life. But how we respond to them, how we cope with them, how we overcome them, who we take shelter of during those things, that's all brand new for us. That's now in this moment. So everything can be changed.
You have to translate this question.
Sorry, do you want to use the microphone?
Yeah.
Я думаю, что очень важно понять, что мы не это тело.
Is thinking that it is very important to understand that we are not that body.
Мы находимся в спектакле, который придумали сами.
And we are in some drama which we composed. Yeah?
И находясь в иллюзии, очень трудно что-то понять. Нужно очень много усилий приложить.
And being in such illusion, it is difficult to understand higher like some knowledge, yes, and we have to do hard, like.
И если пытаться осознавать, что мы не это тело, что это просто спектакль, что это вроде бы есть настоящее, тогда немножко приходишь в себя и начинаешь по-другому мыслить.
Doing such way, we can, so understanding that we are in illusion and хорошо, в спектакле, да, что мы в этом спектакле.
Да. И получается, что
doing such way, the understanding that we are in this drama, we can unbundle from this illusion.
Да, получается, Кришна говорит Арджуне на поле боя Курукшетра: зная такое знание, ты скорбишь о том, что недостойна воля. Мудрые не скорбят ни о живых, ни о мертвых.
Krishna said to Arjuna that if you understand that, So you are not in